All right, guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to talk about why Porsche Taycan prices are tanking so badly, and just kind of in general why EVs don't seem to hold their value very well. I know I talked about getting this car a couple videos ago pretty recently, so check that one out if you want an introduction to it. But I have a Taycan that I bought used, and after doing a lot of research, I think I have a pretty good idea of what prices are doing, why they're getting so cheap, and we can kind of talk about what to expect in the future. So let's go ahead and talk about it, and hopefully you guys find this video useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. Now, before we dig too much into the details, I do want to reiterate what depreciation is, because I saw somebody break it down pretty clearly, and it was something that really kind of resonated with me. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, we control what depreciation is. Depreciation isn't based on the manufacturer or the car or how much it costs to make. It's all about the market. It's about what we are willing to pay for a used car. Now, if you look at most cars, say one is worth $20,000, they'll tell you, oh, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it loses 10 or 15%. But really, that's not an objective fact. What's really happening is when a car costs $20,000, we assume you didn't pay $20K for it. You probably negotiated with the dealer and got it for, maybe $18,000 or $19,000. So if somebody buys it used, they want to pay less money than that, of course, right? It's not really worth what the MSRP says. So maybe they'll offer you like $16,000 or $17,000, even if it's barely used. But what that translates to is somebody's going to look at your car and say, wow, it was worth $20,000. And as soon as you drove it off the lot, people will only offer you 16, when in reality, that's what's being considered. The market is going to want to make sure they are getting a good deal on the car, so they're not going to pay the same price that you did for it when it was brand new. Now, all of this is based on assumptions, obviously, and during 2020 and 21, prices were insane, so it's really hard to use that same justification now, but it does make sense. If you're assuming somebody's paying more than MSRP for a car, you'd be okay with paying MSRP used, because again, that's cheaper than what you can pay for a car when it's brand new. It's all about the mind of the buyer and what they think the car is worth. Nothing else really matters. So how does that stack up with this car? Well, again, this is a 2021 Porsche Taycan. I bought it used with 26,000 miles, and we got the car for $45,000. So this was an extremely good deal, in my opinion, especially on a car that's arguably like the worst value EV out there. There are a lot of different ones available, and if you get like a fully loaded Turbo S, it's easily over $200,000. Now, this car is a base model, so it's not all-wheel drive. It doesn't have all the crazy performance and stuff, but we did get it with some select options that we considered to be important for the driving experience, and the MSRP was $92,000. So 26,000 miles, a couple years old, it lost over 50% of its value, and that's really not uncommon for EVs in this day and age. Even if you look across the ones that are for sale, they're very easily found around, $50,000 to $70,000 on a lot of cars that are, again, MSRPs being around 120 to 200K. So overall, I think it's a good deal. I mean, this is a nice car. It does everything that we want. And even though I wouldn't have been able to afford it new, I don't think it's worth what it costs new either. So what kind of put us in this current predicament? Well, again, it's all based on the market. And if you're like me, you're buying an EV because you want one, not because you have to have one. So I was able to monitor the market for several months, look at how prices were kind of changing, look at a bunch of vehicles with different options. I made offers on a lot of cars, but if we weren't able to make a deal, we weren't able to. I was able to wait until I found a car that was in my price range and had what I wanted. And I think that's very unique to the EV market, because really nobody has to have an EV. So anybody that's looking for an EV, especially a used one, can control what they think the car is worth and wait until they find a car worth that much. I actually reached out to a bunch of dealers that had cars that were right up my alley, but they just were above my price range. And so I reached out to them and asked if they would, accept less for it. And most times they would say, no, that's less than what we paid. And that is a reality with Porsches in particular, but I would argue probably a lot of EVs are in that ballpark. Again, during 2020 and 21, prices were going crazy. So a lot of people were assuming that these cars were really going to hold their value. And in reality, prices came back down, that bubble popped, and a lot of people are sitting on inventory that arguably they paid too much for a used car. And so you see dealers sitting with cars for 3 months, 6 months, sometimes even over a year. I even noticed some of the cars that I was watching to see if the prices would come down would get delisted and then relisted by the same dealer, just so it didn't look like they had been owning the car for so long. But that really is the problem now. These cars were anticipated to really hold their value like other Porsches, other 911s and Caymans and stuff like that. And this is just not in that same range of vehicle. Now you're looking at people that are buying this as an extra car, as something that's more of a utility and not something that they need to have. So the buyer gets to dictate what it's going to be worth. Another aspect to why these cars are getting cheaper is because they were so discounted when they were new. Even though the MSRPs were very high, there were so many different opportunities to save cost. A big one is the EV tax credits. So people were trying to take advantage of that $7,500 tax credit to buy an EV and basically automatically drop the price. You also had a lot of people putting this under corporate lease deals because depending on the weight of the car, if it's over 6,000 pounds, there's a lot of opportunities to get an additional tax credit on your car as a corporate lease vehicle. And so people were doing a lot of different things to get good discounts on these cars and really not paying that much in actual ownership costs during the time that they had it. So it made the cars a lot cheaper than the MSRP when they bought them new anyway. And now, of course, on the used market, we are compensating for that and assuming that these cars are even less. I also think a lot of people don't care about the long-term value of these cars. So whatever lease deals they were able to get, they would take advantage of it, own the car for a couple years, and then give it back to the dealer. So they don't really care what it sells for. Again, with the dealer having to sit on it, it's pretty much their problem. So if you allow me to own a Taycan for 3 years and I only have to pay you 20 grand, I'm going to take that offer. I'm going to buy a different car in 3 years anyway. So all of the people leasing EVs really hurt the used market because they had an overinflated idea of how much they were going to be worth, and now everything's starting to come down. There's also this common sentiment that people say people don't trust EVs and their long-term value. To that, I would kind of say I disagree. I mean, I don't think that's a big impact to the value of the car, but it does reduce the market for people that aren't interested in EVs at all. I wasn't really interested in EVs when I got this, but I felt like, based on the use case, being my wife's daily driver and how she drives her car, it would be a pretty good fit for us. And that's what kind of got us into at least considering it. But for a lot of people that don't want one at all, that could potentially be a factor. So I don't think it makes it cheaper to me. Like, I'm worried about what the long-term costs would be. It's more so just that you have a much smaller buying pool and a lot less people are, fighting for the inventory that's out there. So that does help keep the price down. Now, I would argue the price that people are concerned about is not really a huge factor. These cars are really low on maintenance. You don't really have as much to worry about when it comes to, doing oil changes and fluid changes and spark plugs and all that stuff. With these cars, all you really have to worry about are brakes and tires. And of course, saving money on gas. The cost to power your car through an outlet is going to be much cheaper than filling up the gas tank. So I think long term, the maintenance is going to be much less. Plus, on these Porsche EVs, they have a 100,000 mile warranty on the battery. So even though the factory standard warranty is far expired, if I do have any battery issues on this car, the battery can be replaced completely for free. So a lot of people are exercising that, especially on the older ones. If they do have any issues, they get the battery replaced and it's back good as new. Now, on the other side of that, there have been a lot of lemon law Taycans. There have been a lot of OEM buybacks. And I think this is something that probably affects a lot of EVs in general, but Taycans in particular, you'll see a lot of them on the market with a branded title. And the reason is pretty complex. I'll probably make a whole separate video on why there are so many lemon law Taycans out there. But considering the fact that a lot of these cars had issues that just caused them to stay at the dealer for more than 30 days, or maybe they had electrical components that were hard to source, especially during 2020 and 21, times were kind of crazy, and it was pretty easy to lemon law a car. So when people see that, they automatically want to pay less for the car. That never comes off of the title. You can't just, put it back on the road and get it clean title again. And so that's going to hurt the value of the cars as well, especially if you're going to be the first person to buy it after it was recently repaired. It's going to knock down the cost pretty significantly. Now, there are a couple things that are particular to the Taycan itself that even hurts it more than other EVs. A big one, at least at this point, is this was a first generation vehicle and the refresh just came out last year. So a lot of people are interested in the refresh. They want the updated batteries, the extra range, and all the benefits that come with that. Although it is more expensive and a lot of people argue they think it doesn't look as good, that isn't a factor for, I would say, majority of people. Most people want the newest car, they want a brand new lease, and they want to be able to, enjoy the car for several years. So if you're buying a used car, it might be easier to find one simply because so many more people are looking to get out of it and jump into, the newer refresh. And that's kind of what I feel like I was able to get advantage of because this car was very low miles. I'm assuming it was a lease return and they probably just jumped into a 2025. The other thing is this car is missing a lot of technology that you see on other EVs, and it's pretty standard nowadays. Like the over-the-air updates are pretty small. The actual things that they can update are limited. So a lot of things you have to bring it into the dealership and it might take 24 hours for it to update and stuff. And people don't like that. People don't want to be without their cars. People don't want to have to deal with a bunch of recalls and stuff. So with a Tesla, you probably get in your car and just get a message on the dash that tells you, update your car the same way you update your cell phone. But on a Taycan, it's typically a much more involved process. It takes a lot longer and it's just not as convenient. So that's something that's probably reducing the market as well. So with that in mind, what do I think about the future state? And honestly, I feel like these cars aren't going to just completely tank. I don't expect these cars ever to be worth like $5,000 or $10,000 or something like that. I think that there are a lot of things in favor of the vehicles, at least, leveling out at a certain price point. A big one is a lot of people are working on finding ways to make these EVs last longer. You're seeing shops pop up with different ways to retrofit, higher voltage batteries, longer lasting batteries, or just in general being able to replace your batteries at home. Somebody just posted a DIY of how they were able to repair some cells on a super high mileage car because it was having some issues with the battery and they basically fixed it at home. So the idea of that will make these cars a lot more popular once you're able to find these on the used market, maybe, buy spare parts on eBay and stuff like that. It's going to be much better or easier of a selling point to people that are concerned about long-term reliability and maintenance costs. And I do think we've seen a lot of people update on like the long-term experiences of some of these vehicles, especially like Teslas and stuff that have been sold for 10 plus years, showing how much the batteries actually degrade over time. And it's pretty clear that mileage is a much bigger factor than age. You don't automatically assume that a battery is going to be worn out just because the car is 10 years old. It's more about how long it's been driven. So these batteries are lasting much longer than people expect. They're holding their charge much better. They're able to go a much longer range than they might originally anticipate, simply because we were overestimating what the degradation would be, which is, again, favorable on our side. So yeah, I think with cars being overpriced initially, again, especially this Taycan, probably the worst in that scenario, they're going to still be relatively expensive. $45,000 still isn't cheap, but I think it is a good value. And as we're starting to see more of these cars even under $40,000 nowadays, I think it indicates that we're going to get to a point where it'll kind of flatten out and demand will kind of match what's available. So hopefully we'll still be able to enjoy these cars without taking too much of a bath. So I don't plan on selling this anytime soon, so that's not a huge concern or issue for me. But if you are looking at buying a used car, I'd say this is going to be your time. We're approaching those dates where there's going to be a lot of different options, a lot of ones available, and you'll kind of be able to sit back and pick and choose what you prefer. So let me know your thoughts. Have you guys bought a used EV recently? What kind of deals were you able to find? Are you in the market at all, or are you still going to wait and see what happens over the next 5 years or so? Definitely curious to hear your thoughts, but for now, that's it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.